DreAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is the 4 marketing modalities. That is the topic here today. The 4 marketing modalities. I'll explain to you exactly what that means, of course, when we get into this. But before we do that, I'll remind you of a couple of things. First of all, getting on my text message list. It is free to join. All you got to do is text me at my number, which is listed down below in the description. Secondly, workonmygame.com. Go to workonmygame.com, put your email address in on that page so you're getting my emails that I send out every single day completely for free. Third, workonyourgameuniversity.com. Workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's where you can work with me directly and have me as your direct coach. Those things out of the way. And the links to all those are down below in the description to this episode. The 4 marketing modalities. Any of you who works, especially as you're an entrepreneur, or if you are in any form of sales or marketing, marketing is the lifeblood of your business. Marketing sets the table for selling. It builds and extends your relationships with your prospects, who hopefully become your customers and your clients. To that end, we all need to understand the modalities of marketing, where it actually comes from, how it actually works, and the 4 and only 4 ways that you can do any form of marketing so that you can do them at your best and do them as consistently and as effectively as possible. So once I get into explaining what these are, it'll make perfect sense to you. So I don't need to give too much more of an introduction. Let's just get right to it. Point number 1. Topic, once again, is the 4 marketing modalities. The first one is one-to-one of people who you already know and who already know you. First marketing modality is having one-to-one conversations with people who are already familiar with you. This is the communication that you have in the personal conversations with people who already know who you are. This can be in the form of a direct email that you send to them, a text message, in the flesh meetings, and virtual conversations such as a FaceTime or a Zoom call, and any other way in which 2 people can communicate. All right, this is just one-to-one communication with someone who already knows you. So you're not talking to just a brand new person breaking the ice. This is just a person you already know, and you're having a conversation with them for the purposes of business. So I'm not talking about just talking to your girlfriend or your child on the phone. I'm talking to someone who you're talking to for business purposes. This communication matters because this allows you to extend relationships, and there are certain conversations that are better had one-to-one rather than having them amongst a group. All right, many of you listening to this, there are some times when you want to talk to somebody, but you rather talk to them privately one-to-one, so that whatever gets said is just between you and that person, rather than having a conversation with them in front of 2 or 3 or 50 other people. Sometimes some conversations is better for one-to-one exchange, better than a one-to-many exchange, even if you're talking to the exact same person. So that's why this communication matters so much. And some people also, on top of that, some people just prefer personal conversations. Some people don't want to be part of a group to have conversations. They rather just have one-to-one conversations with one individual. Some people just don't like being in groups, and some people love being in groups. So you want to be able to reach people in the space in which they are most comfortable, especially if you're trying to do any type of influence or persuasion of another person. You probably want them to be comfortable when you're influencing or persuading them, or hey, maybe not. Depending on what way you're trying to influence or persuade, maybe it could work in either direction. But the point being, some people prefer a personal conversation, so you should be good at having personal conversations over a group conversation, depending on the dynamics of the situation and the subject matter being discussed. Now, something that I often stress is the value of communication. And every one of these I'm going to lay out here today, you need to be very good at all of them. If you're going to do any form of high ticket selling, such as selling things to people that cost in the, let's just say, the 5 figures and up. Some people say high ticket is $5,000 and up. I like to put it around the $10,000 mark, but $5,000 is a fair number as well. Anything high ticket, what you consider to be a high ticket sale, which is just bigger numbers than what you are generally used to selling in general. You're going to sell that way. You need to be good at having one-to-one conversations, because often there will be a one-to-one conversation involved in some way, whether up front before that person makes a financial commitment or immediately after they make a financial commitment. There will be some form of one-to-one conversation happening, which means you need to be good at it. because the only way anybody's going to commit is if they either already had a one-to-one conversation or they're looking forward to having one. And if you don't have it or they don't like it, then they might change their mind. That all said, let's move on to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is the 4 marketing modalities. The second one is having one-to-one conversations with people who you do not know and or who do not know you. So these are people who maybe have never heard of you before, but they're having a conversation with you now. They may not be familiar with you or your work at all, but they want to have a conversation with you for whatever reason. Maybe they came across one of your ads, maybe they clicked on a link of yours, maybe they heard you on somebody else's platform, and now they're interested in talking to you, but they don't know you, you don't know them, but a conversation is going to be had. Now, especially in today's world where everything is digital and often passive, if a person is willing to have a private conversation with you, that communicates a certain level of commitment that this person has already made, because they could easily go the passive route, as many people do. So if someone commits to having a conversation, knowing that it's going to be a conversation, that's a high bar for anybody to get over. It's much easier for me to tell you, hey, go get this free download off of my website by going to xyz.com, put your email address in, and you get the free download. You never had to talk to me. Then if I say, hey, if you want this free download, schedule a time to have a conversation with me. And then after the conversation, I'll give you the free download. I'll give away a lot more of my free gift if I just let you do it the passive way than if I force you to jump over the hurdle of having to actually talk to me first. Most human beings prefer the passive way. Well, first of all, it's usually a little bit faster. And secondly, there's a lot less anxiety involved in just going and clicking on a link than there is actually having to talk to a human being. And the world that we're in today, with so many people so glued to our devices, and we're doing a whole lot of our communication with humans through devices rather than through actual flesh-to-flesh communication. A lot of human beings have actually gotten worse at communication, not better. And people are much more antsy and anxious about having direct conversations with anyone, simply because you don't have to get as much practice to have some form of engagement with human beings. You can do it all through a phone and never really talk to people in the flesh at all. So it's actually getting harder and harder to find people who are willing to clear the bar, so to speak, of having direct communication in an active way rather than a passive way. So someone who does do that, especially if they don't know you, all right, they are communicating a high level of commitment, just the fact they even went that far. So to this end, in addition to everything else that I've said so far here, you need to be good at building rapport, breaking ice. Breaking ice just means basically warming up, you and another person warming up to each other, asking the right questions to get people to talk and be open, and active listening to the things that they share with you. These are all important in any conversation. Of course, they are doubly and triply important when you're talking to someone who doesn't know you and has no background nor history with you, because all of this determines how long that conversation is going to go, how deep it goes, and whether there will be another conversation after the first one. Moving on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is the 4 marketing modalities. Number 3 is one-to-many conversation, talking to a bunch of people at once, and these are people who already know who you are. One-to-many to people who know you and you know them. So this is a conversation that you can, a broadcast, so to speak, to multiple people at the same time who already know you. There's already some sort of relationship already established. So as an example of this could be something like having a group coaching call with a bunch of members in your group coaching program who are already in the program. They already know who you are, and you already know who each one of them is. They may even know each other if you're having the group calls often enough, and you get a lot of the same people showing up to the calls. So this show, for example, is an example of one-to-many communication with people who already know you. Most of you who are listening to the show have listened to at least one episode in the past. There are some people listening to this right now who are listening to me for the first time, but a bunch of you are listening and you've heard me before. So you already know me, so to speak, in some way because you are familiar with my work. And I wouldn't even say I necessarily know you, because some of you listen to this and I do not know you because I've never heard from you before, but you know me because you've been listening to the show on a consistent basis for some period of time. So there's some knowing going on one direction or another. So this is how sometimes people can know you, but you don't know them. And sometimes you can know another person, but they don't know you. And then, of course, you have the situation where you both know each other. So this show right here, as I said, this can be an example. Many of you have heard of me before, at least one episode. Some of you may be listening for the first time. The majority of you are listening again, whether it's time number 2 or time number 2000. Email broadcast is another example. If you get emails from me, it's usually not the first email you ever got from me. And so you know who it's coming from. You know who I am. You got a feel for what my style is. You may not know exactly what I'm going to say, but you got a pretty good feel for my style. That's one-to-many communication with people with whom I am already familiar. Now, sometimes these can be mixed together because when I put an episode out of this show or put a video on YouTube, there are some people watching who are, as YouTube calls them, returning visitors. They've watched your content before and they're coming back. And then you have new visitors. Those are people who have never watched any of your stuff and they're looking at you for the first time. And YouTube, in their analytics, which is basically just the data, the stats of your YouTube channel, they give you all this data. They tell you exactly how many people are looking at your content who are new, how many people are looking who are old, they've been around before, and they'll give you that data for every individual video if you want to go that deep. So YouTube's pretty good with analytics and giving you this data, which is why I'm thinking using these terms, because these are the terms that they use when you look at their data. So if you're a sales manager, for example, and you have a morning meeting with your sales team every day, that is an example of one-to-many communication with people who you already know. Why? Because you need to sell your team every morning on getting activated and motivated to do their damn jobs for the upcoming day. You want them to perform at a high level, then you got to set them up to perform at a high level by you just having some touch, having a touch with them, a touch point with your team, and letting them know that you see them and reminding them what they need to know. If there's a restaurant, you might remind them of, here's today's special. Make sure you mention this. Make sure you get everybody to fill out the birthday card so we can give them a 20% discount to come on their birthday, whatever it is. And if you're a sales team, you're sending people outside to go make sales. They're out like knocking on doors, making sales. You got to get them motivated and excited to go out there and knock on doors because they're going to get a bunch of them slammed in their faces. The whole point is you're having a touch point with people who you already know for a specific reason. And this is one of the reasons why people need to master one-to-many communication. Another thing about one-to-many communication that makes it, over time, it can get more and more tricky, is that you have to keep coming up with fresh ways to share similar messages. If you're a sports team coach, for example, there's a certain message that you need to give to your players all the time and over and over again. Maybe even your coaching staff over and over again. You got to give them the same message. The challenge for a leader in a sports coaching situation is that you have to keep coming up with new ways of saying the same thing, because it's not like you're changing the message to your players that we need to be really tough on defense and not give up a wide open 3-pointers and easy layups, and we got to protect the ball in football and make sure we're not turning the ball over, and we got to win the turnover battle and the field advantage battle. Those principles do not change year over year with you as a coach. But if you keep saying the exact same thing every single time, then people may start tuning it out because they feel like they heard it before. So the challenge for you I'm just using sports coach as an example here. This applies to business leaders as well. Anyone who's in charge of a group of people and you're going to be dealing with them for an extended period of time, is not that you have to pull a rabbit out of your hat and come up with some brand new thing to talk to them about every single time. It's coming up with different ways to talk about the same thing. People talk about this in marriages as well. How can you come up with some new and unique ways to do the same things that need to be done? And this is a skill. It's a challenge as well, because if you can't figure it out, then things can get really dull and really stale really quickly. So keeping people activated and engaged over time, even though your principles and messages don't really change. So after all, a message can only be new one time. Right? We all get this. But people need to hear a message more than once before they get it and act on it. See, that's the tricky part of just life in general, is that things are only new once, but most people do not act on a thing the first time they come across it. They have to think about it. Maybe they have to hear it multiple times before they even notice that it got said. Then they have to kind of marinate on it and think about it a little bit. And then they finally get around to doing something. But they might have heard something 47 times before they get around to the action of doing something with what they've heard. All right, this is just human nature. Human beings tend to have hard heads. So we got to hear things more than once. So this ability to refresh and repackage the same message is just as much a skill as anything else. And when you're talking one-to-many, especially people who already know you, this is the most important time that this comes up. Moving on to point number 4. Today's topic, once again, is the 4 marketing modalities. Number 4, one-to-many of people who do not know you. People who have never heard of you before. This is the next one-to-many challenge. Now, this is your open communication to groups of people who, again, are coming across you for maybe the first time. And for some reason, they are open to hearing what you have to say. Politicians, for example, need to get really good at this because, of course, politicians have their base of fans who are already their supporters. But most politicians usually to win an election, you have to pull some voters who otherwise were thinking about either voting for your opponent or they were considering not voting at all. And you have to reach out to them, get your message out to them so that they might be persuaded to vote for you. So you can't just go off of what you already have. You got to go grab some extras in every election. This is pretty much how it works. So politicians need to be really good at this because they always want to engage new fans and turn those new fans into new voters for every election that they get involved in. Also keep in mind that sometimes you will be communicating to many people who already know you and many people who don't already know you, both at the same time. Sometimes you have these groups mixed together. As I explained, some of you watching this on video or listening to this on audio have heard of me before, and some of you listening to this or watching this have never heard of me before. So I have a mix of both of you here all at the same time. So you have to be able to get your point across to both sides, keeping your message simple enough that someone who doesn't know your work can understand, while at the same time making it fresh and interesting enough that someone who does know your work and has heard you talk about the subject before still wants to follow along and engage. And I should say in this moment, is a good time to insert this point, is that just because an audience has heard you say a certain thing before does not mean they will not listen to you saying it again. If they liked it, they might want to hear it twice. All right? How many of you ever listened to a song more than once, or read a book more than once, or watched a video more than once, or listened to a lesson, you were taking a course or something more than once? All of us have done it. Why? Because if we like something enough, we don't mind engaging in it again. When you were a child, or any of you who has young children, you may notice that a young child, when they like a story, they want to hear the same story. All right, tell that story again. I want to hear that story again. Read that same book to me tonight that you read last night. When we like things, we don't mind hearing them more than once. So do not be fooled into thinking that just because you said something to your audience one time, you should never say it again because they'll get tired of it or get mad at you for saying the same thing twice, or they'll think that maybe you don't have enough substance because you had to use the same message twice. First of all, most people don't even notice when you say the same thing more than once because they didn't even hear you or it didn't register the first time you did it. Secondly, even if someone did hear you say it the first time, most people didn't do anything with what you told them, and people got to hear things more than one time before they actually take action. This is just, again, human nature. And it's also human nature to think that just because you said something once that everybody heard you, when the reality is, no, they didn't. They didn't hear you. And even if they heard you, they weren't listening. There's a difference. So most people in the room, if you already said something to everybody in the room 2 days ago or 2 weeks ago, and there's 100 people in the room, if you say it again 2 days later, that 90 people in that room, 90% of the room is not going to remember that you said that 2 days ago. And the 10% who did, if they like it, they'll be happy that you said it again. And the 90% who didn't even notice the first time, they'll be like, wow, that was amazing what you just said. Nobody's going to say, hey, you said that before. Come up with something new. Nobody's going to say that. So this key skill, again, keeping your message simple enough that the people who already know are interested still, and the people who don't know can follow along. All right, there's a balance to be found here. And again, this is a high level skill. So a football coach, as I explained, who's been coaching the same team for 10 years, they've had to repeat the same things over and over again, but you got to have the skill of finding different ways to get the same point across so that the person who is hearing the message for the 30th time does not get bored and start tuning you out. And this is really important in anywhere that you're going to be long-term, especially as a leader, because eventually people have heard every possible approach you could possibly bring to the table. It's just finding different ways to use the same approach. Again, same thing that applies to a politician on the campaign trail, a teacher at school, or a parent at home. There's only so many times you can repeat the same things before people start tuning out everything that you say because they feel like they already heard it. So you want to keep them on their toes, knowing that you're going to pull out something new, even though the principles and the message are generally the same. Recapping today's class was the 4 marketing modalities. Anyone who is in marketing, especially you entrepreneurs, need to understand these 4 skills, need to develop them. Number 1, one-to-one communication with people who already know you. All right, this is your personal communication, direct communication with people who, again, are already familiar. This is one that most of you already know pretty well. Number 2, one-to-one conversation and communication with people who do not know you. This is how you start breaking the ice, building rapport, winning friends, and influencing people, is having conversations with people who don't know you, communicating with them, and getting them to see things at least somewhat your way and getting to like you, agree with you, move forward with you, etc. Number 3, one-to-many communication of people who you do know. Now, this is the broadcast conversation. This is making a video, putting it on your YouTube channel, writing an email, sending it out to your list. Those are messages that you're sending out to multiple people at once, but at the same time, you are talking to people who already know you. So there's a certain level of familiarity that comes with this that doesn't come with the next step, was the point number 4, one-to-many of people who don't know you. So this is the open communication with people who are not yet familiar with you, but they are open to hearing what you have to say. So you have an opening here. Politicians do this. Religious leaders do this. And you got to be really good at it when you're in certain spaces, especially when you're climbing the uphill battles of people having already decided that they may not be a fan of yours or are not going to support you no matter what you say, but you still got to show up and actually say it so that you can't say that you didn't try. All right. So this skill here is keeping your message simple enough that someone who doesn't know your work can understand you and they can understand why they should follow along, while at the same time it's fresh and interesting enough for the people who have known you already that whatever you just said is still interesting. So there's a delicate mix and balance to be found here, and the mastery of that mix is why they pay you the big bucks. All that said, everybody, my links to workonmygame.com to get on my email list, workingyourgameuniversity.com to have me as your coach down below in the description. Work on your game. Dre, all